The cabin was a sanctuary. Nestled deep within the woods, it promised peace. Emma, a writer seeking inspiration, found solace in its isolation. The scent of pine filled the air. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves outside. She smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over her.
This is perfect.
Emma set up her typewriter on a sturdy wooden table. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. She took a deep breath, ready to lose herself in her writing.
All right, let's do this.
The first few hours passed in a blur of creativity. Words flowed effortlessly from her fingertips. As the night deepened, a comfortable silence settled over the cabin. It was the kind of silence that only existed miles away from civilization. A noise broke the silence, a soft whisper, barely audible. Emma paused, listening intently.
Probably just the wind.
She returned to her work, her fingers flying across the keys, but the whispers continued, intermittent at first, then more frequent. They seemed to slither around the edges of her awareness, like phantom fingers tracing her spine. Emma shivered, fear prickling at the back of her neck.
It's just the old cabin, maybe mice, or the wind.
She tried to rationalize the sounds. The old cabin probably had mice, or maybe it was the wind whistling through the cracks. But deep down, a cold dread began to bloom in her stomach. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Emma jumped, her heart pounding. It was Mark, her boyfriend. He was checking in, worried about her being alone in the woods. His voice, usually so reassuring, now seemed very far away.
Everything okay?
He asked, his voice crackling through the receiver. Emma hesitated, unsure how to explain the whispers, the growing sense of unease that had settled over her.
Yeah, fine. Just a little creeped out, you know how it is.
Mark laughed, a warm sound that did little to ease her fear. They chatted for a few more minutes, his words washing over her like a balm. But as soon as she hung up, the silence returned, heavier and more menacing than before. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from just outside the cabin walls, circling her like a predator stalking its prey. Emma's hand trembled as she reached for the phone again. She had to talk to Mark, hear his voice. But the line was dead. She tried again, her heart sinking as she heard the telltale silence.
The storm must have knocked out the lines.
She realized, panic rising in her chest. She was alone, truly alone. The fire had dwindled to glowing embers, casting long, grotesque shadows across the room. Emma huddled on the sofa, her back pressed against the wall. She clutched a heavy book in her hand, her only weapon against the unseen terror that surrounded her.
I can do this. I can do this.
The room was dark, lit only by the dying embers of the fire. The whispers continued, relentless and terrifying.
You're never alone.
Never alone.
Emma's heart raced as she braced herself for whatever came next. Something moved outside the window, a fleeting shadow, gone as quickly as it appeared.
Gasps.
Emma froze, holding her breath. Her eyes darted to the window, searching the darkness for any sign of movement.
Whispering. Do you see it?
The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. A tree branch scraped against the roof, sounding like fingernails scratching on a chalkboard.
Whispers. What was that?
Emma jumped at every creak and groan of the old cabin. Her imagination, fueled by fear, conjured up images far more terrifying than any whispered threat.
Whispering. It's just your mind.
She thought she saw a face peering through the window. A pale, gaunt face with eyes that glinted in the moonlight. But when she blinked, it was gone.
Softly. Was it real or just my imagination?
Had it been real or just a figment of her overactive imagination? A loud thump from downstairs shattered the tense silence.
Gasping. Oh my God!
Emma gasped, her blood turning to ice. The sound was unmistakable. Someone or something was inside the cabin.
Frantically. No, no, no!
She grabbed the phone, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. Dead. Still dead.
Whispering. No escape.
She crept towards the bedroom, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Reaching the door, she pressed her ear against the cold wood. Silence.
Whispering. Maybe it's just my imagination.
Maybe it had been her imagination. Maybe she was just letting the isolation get to her.
Whispering. Don't turn around.
As she turned to leave, she saw it. A tall, shadowy figure standing at the end of the hall. Its features were obscured by darkness, but she could feel its eyes fixed on her.
Terrified. No, please no.
A cold dread washed over her, paralyzing her with fear. Section 7. Panic and Flight.
I didn't hesitate. I ran. Back down the hallway, through the living room, my lungs burning with exertion.
She fumbled with the lock on the front door, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the key. The figure moved towards her, its footsteps slow and deliberate. It made no sound, yet its presence filled the cabin, suffocating her.
My fingers finally closed around the doorknob.
She threw open the door and stumbled out into the night. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows and moonlight. Tree branches reached out like skeletal arms, trying to snag her clothes, trip her up. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't. Not with that thing on her heels. Section 8. The Chase.
Whispering. Run.
Whispering. Faster.
The whispers followed her, taunting her, urging her on. They seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the trees, bouncing off the trunks.
My breath came in ragged gasps. My legs screamed for me to stop, but I pushed myself harder.
She could hear it behind her, moving with an unnatural speed and agility. It didn't stumble over roots or crash through the undergrowth like she did. It glided through the forest, silent and deadly as a phantom. The forest floor was littered with obstacles, but Emma didn't dare slow down to look. She tripped over a fallen log, her ankle twisting beneath her. Pain shot up her leg, but she scrambled back to her feet, driven by pure primal fear. Section 9. A Glimmer of Hope.
Through the trees I saw it. A light. Faint, but unmistakable. Headlights cutting through the darkness. Salvation.
With renewed determination, she surged forward, her lungs burning, her legs on fire. She had to reach that light. It was her only hope. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They swirled around her, trying to drag her back into the darkness. But the light beckoned, promising safety, promising an end to the terror. Emma stumbled out of the trees and into the middle of the road.
The car screeched to a halt, its headlights blinding me.
Emma shielded her eyes, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and residual fear. She had escaped. She was safe, or was she? Section 10. Gone. The driver, a kind-faced woman, helped Emma into the car. She wrapped a blanket around her trembling shoulders and offered her a warm drink. As the car sped away from the dark and silent woods, Emma glanced back at the trees, searching for any sign of her pursuer. The forest stood silent and dark, the trees swaying gently in the wind. There was no sign of the figure, no trace of the whispers that had haunted her. It was as if it had never existed at all.
But deep down, in the pit of my stomach, a cold dread lingered.
Emma knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she would never truly escape the horrors of that night. The whispers would follow her, always lurking just beyond the edge of her awareness, a constant reminder of the terror she had faced in the heart of the woods.